So let's take a look at what happens once the email actually reaches the ESA. We talked about DNS records, MX lookups. We talked a little bit about the high availability. Maybe we've got multiple ESAs. But when that traffic comes in, what are we going to do? Well, I said it's easiest to think about this in 3 phases. And if you're experienced with this, you might look at that and go, 3 phases, there's way more that's happening than that. I know we're just breaking it into big categories, and then each of these categories is going to have several steps within it, right? So I think about this as like incoming, processing, and then outgoing. It's really that easy. And what you want to think about this as is, hey, this is a filter to protect Exchange. It's to protect Curio. It's to protect XM or whatever you're using. And this is that firewall that goes in front of it. Now, that firewall is not only protecting the server from getting malicious content and overwhelmed with all these connections, but it's also really protecting the users that are behind it. And then ultimately, the company that purchases it because we can look for things like, of course, data loss. We can look for, especially with things like the WSA, lost revenue, just with people browsing the web and wasting time. So using these additional controls are going to let us gain security is such a broad term, but we're going to gain many different levels of improvement in security in lots of different disciplines. Again, looking at the ESA itself, we can limit based on the volume of traffic that's coming in. We can do so on the content, and we can also have some restrictions on what's going on delivery-wise. When we take a look at the incoming email processing, the first thing that happens is going to be our reputation filters, right? We take a look at who the message is coming from. Is this somebody that we even want to be dealing with? And the idea is that some of the features that happen, like your reputation filter up front there, just let's throw the traffic away early if we don't need it. Next, let's look at some message filters. Let's figure out, is this appropriate? Is this spam? If it's not, all right, well, let's look at it a little bit deeper, leveraging antivirus and AMP. Finally, let's make sure that it's not just unsolicited wasteful marketing that was opted in for. We can ultimately, after that, apply content filters and then outbreak filters. A lot of these are on by default, but you can enable, disable them as necessary. They're all going to be supported on top of the async operating system. This is a dedicated OS that they built that the ESA runs on top of. So all of our services, everything's basically running on top of a hardened platform that should be much safer and much more resilient to attacks. What they're showing you here, just by contrast, is outgoing email processing. And just to contrast it once more, I'll click backwards, and you'll notice that all the boxes are lit up with different colors. And then this is incoming. And then again, to contrast, here's outgoing. So you'll notice that reputation filters are off. Anti-spam is off. Outbreak filters are off. The idea here is that we don't think that we're the problem. Who does, right? We look at it and we go, okay, well, we're sending out email, but certainly, who's got to check a reputation? It's us. We're not looking at global IP data of the sender because, perhaps the sender's inside the company. It's a corporate user. So by turning off additional checks, you're basically saving resources. That's nice. Anti-spam, we'd like to think that we're not the ones spamming. And if we are, well, our spam is better than other people's spam. I know that other stuff's spam, but these are great deals people should hear about. We don't want to filter our own messages. You see that antivirus grayscale content filters are enabled, and then again, outbreak filters are off. Again, you could turn a lot of these things on or off, and you can adjust the policies to your liking. So just to kind of make this a bit more tangible or see how it would be applied, let's discuss a use case for doing both incoming and outgoing mail filtering. So I think it's fairly believable to say somebody might come to me in the office and say, hey, can you fill in this requested information in a Word file that I'm sending you? And I go, that's normal. People ask me to fill out documents all the time. But this form.docx actually has an additional extension there. That's because some operating systems will hide the .exe and just show you form.docx. So when content comes in, is this sleazy? Is this something that we like or don't like? If I want to stop that type of stuff, I can stop it. Now I got another message says, you're the millionth visitor. Click here to win your prize. I'm pessimistic. I don't think anybody really wins anything. I think this is marketing crap. I'm going to block this. I hope I didn't just ruin somebody's big day where they really won something, but maybe things that look suspicious. If anybody is a prince that's trying to send you $1 million, I go, you know what? I'm going to err on the side of caution and say that's probably not really a prince that's trying to send you $1 million. So again, we're looking at things before they come in, and before the user even gets a chance to make a decision, we're just saying, you know what? That's not something we really want going on here. Over here, we've got this information is from the corporate credit card. We've seen issues dealing with accountants and tax folks regularly for the last many, many years. And they just have to deal with sensitive data day in and day out. And they're not all thrilled about technology and encryption and best practices, right? So what we can do is we can say, hey, if people aren't using best practices, if I'm allowed to, look inside this email, if it's something I should be decrypting or, analyzing, and you can apply this to different groups of users or between domains, but we say if we see this type of information, credit card number, social security, PII, whatever, maybe names of new drugs that we're working on that are in trials. If we see clinical trials being discussed with external domains, you know what? Go ahead and send me an email or send me a notification. Let me as the administrator know that that's going on, and I'll investigate further. Or, potentially you can drop that stuff. But again, this just gives us a much more granular control over the email that's flowing back and forth. If you think about previously, what were our capabilities? If we don't have an ESA, what am I using to really lock down my email? You probably have some controls inside of your mail server software where you can do some filtering, and there's software that you could run as well. But for most of us, at least the customers, a lot that I've worked with historically, they didn't have great mechanisms, I call them nerd knobs, the dials that we can control to kind of rein things in the way that we want as geeks that want to kind of control the bits. If I don't have like a pairing of like, hey firewall, hey sensor, when you see this data pass, do that. If I can't be specific with my if condition, I can't create good rules. So the ESA gives us an abundance of rules for email control that we wouldn't have had previously. As the class goes on, you're going to see some of the different capabilities that we have. But remember that this score is a very, it's an introduction. It's just the tip of the iceberg for all the things that these various devices can do under the hood. It's just to kind of whet the palate, get you interested and say, hey, maybe this is something that we could apply and it would benefit our security in a certain way. Good deal. So again, here we are just looking at the policies for inbound versus outbound mail filtering. So when you create policies, here it is just a default policy. And you've got things that are enabled: anti-spam, antivirus, AMP, gray mail, content filter, etc. When we decide to enable or disable here, it's going to apply to everybody because it's the default policy. So unless I'm given a requirement for not touching defaults, sometimes people don't want you to, they want you to do everything customized. But in scenarios like this, I would say I like to change everything in the default to match what the company needs. And I go, here, this should fit everyone. And you go, you can't make everyone happy. And I go, I know, but I can try. So after our company-wide policy doesn't work, someone comes in, they says, I'm different, I'm unique, I need this because. We validate it, and then we add a policy. And I can go, okay, well, for these users, and then anti-spam, antivirus, AMP, etc., I can tweak. So my email controls and the policies, each of these, like things like gray mail filtering, it's not just to turn it on, turn it off with a big lever. You're going to be able to get in there and control various attributes. I called them nerd knobs. It's kind of a slang term. But we've got a lot of dials that we can use to control to build specific policies. So again, from a high level, on or off, and then we can have specific policies for specific users. Start with broad strokes, and then make your exceptions as you need. What you see at the bottom is an outgoing mail policy, and it looks real similar. It's default, it applies to everybody: anti-spam, antivirus, AMP, gray mail, content filter, outbreak filter. What's this? DLP. So DLP wasn't on our incoming rule sets, but it is available on the outgoing rule set.